to allow you to then get back into a better position more comfortably, so that when you're trying to maintain better postures day to day, you can do so from a better shape without trying to sort of force yourself against a lot of that stiffness that you may have. G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about two of the most important things to consider when trying to fix a Dowager's hump. Now, more specifically, I want to give you the necessary perspective that you need in order to figure out the cause of your Dowager's hump and an exercise that you must be doing to try and give yourself the best chance for it to go away. Now, when we're talking about the things that you need to be aware of, this necessary perspective that you have to understand to see a Dowager's hump for what it is, the first thing that we need to talk about, the first of two most important things to talk about, is we need to have a conversation about your postural habits. So not only the positions and the shapes that you let your body get into, but the value and the awareness that you have around your day-to-day postures and shapes. There is a small percentage of people who have a Dowager's hump that have a genetic aspect to this. The really important thing to understand, whether your Dowager's hump has a genetic aspect or not, is that because you live in this modern world, we cannot tell you what percentage of your dysfunction is due to genetics and what percentage of your dysfunction is just due to the environmental stresses that you place on that area. And then if you're confident that you're nailing everything, then maybe you can start to attribute some of that dysfunction to genetics or to something that might be out of your control. But you cannot get into that headspace until you've done all these other things to make sure that you're not like everyone else, where maybe your postural habits or the positions and shapes you're getting into aren't as good as your body needs them to be. So when we're talking about a Dowager's hump, obviously we're talking about this excessive bump and lump that people develop at the base of their neck and the top of their upper back. Now, from a postural perspective, the overwhelming majority of Dowager's humps come from positions that force you to look down enough to bring in that section of your upper back and neck, that junction between your neck and upper back, and you stay there for long enough that your body has to adapt and react to that area. We know that the weight of your head is quite significant in relation to the rest of your body. As soon as you start to take your head away from that initial ideal postural position, then the load starts to increase through wherever that hinge starts to be. So for most people, this tends to look like sitting up and looking down, using your phone, reading a book, doing work, using your laptop. It can be anything like that. But the other thing that I think gets missed a lot is that we can actually do it from the opposite direction as well, where you may actually have your head up and looking forwards, but the position of your back relative to that head creates the same shape. So whether you're someone who likes to recline back in a recliner, maybe sit up in bed and read a book or watch TV, maybe you just sink into a chair to do whatever you're doing looking forwards. If I'm in this position, even though my head's relatively straight, if I then keep the same shape but straighten my body back up again, I'm still in that same neck to back relative position that I would if I was up tall looking down. So the common thread that we need to make sure that you're understanding, if you have a Dowager's hump and you want to get rid of a Dowager's hump, it is absolutely essential that you can take a step back and analyze the shapes and positions that you get into the most throughout the day. It may be work related, it may just be leisure related, it may be related to something that you never thought of before, but the positions that you get into most throughout the day are the ones that you need to start trying to get a really strong sense of where your head and neck are positioned. So if we want to make sure that we're getting to the point where you're starting to get this Dowager's hump to resolve, you're doing some exercises, maybe some mobility work or some strength work, and you're making some progress, if you then keep consistently putting your body back into those same shapes, even if you're not realizing it, then it's going to be a really strong handbrake to any long-term future progress. But the other thing that gets missed a lot in this conversation is it's actually not good enough to just think of your positions and postures at the start of your activity. Because the hard thing about nailing good posture consistently, and why it's so important to make sure that your environment supports you in a better shape, is that when you're engrossed in something and your attention is focused on something external, it's very hard in the moment to take some of that attention and place it back on yourself to reassess where you're at. But like any postural change, you need to have that ambition to and that drive to start out in a good position. You have to have that sort of thinking and that ability to step outside of yourself to analyze how you're going incrementally while you're doing that activity. Because again, if you're working hard on the exercises and you're working hard on changing the dysfunction that you've unknowingly accrued over the years, then you're going to be capped at how quickly or how much change you're going to make if you're consistently getting back into those bad shapes. So In terms of the second most important thing that I think we need to make sure that you are doing in order to fix this Dowager's hump is you need a mobility exercise to undo all of the stiffness and tightness that you've accrued over the years without realizing it by being in a less than ideal shape. Even if there is that genetic component involved, you might find that you can slow down or optimize the function of that area by removing as many stiff, tight, and restricted handbrakes that are there, and then make sure that you can restore as much normal function of that area as possible. So you can choose between a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball. You can choose between a single ball or a double ball. I've been on the peanut train a little bit more recently, and again, they're very easy to make just with some tape, but if you want to get one officially, I'll leave a link in the description so you can pick one of those up. But ultimately what we want to do is we want to go looking for where the areas of stiffness and tightness are that you've accrued over the years your body's had to develop by supporting a position you've been getting into unknowingly. And the reason why mobility is really important here is because when you get into a position often and consistently and persistently throughout your life, it gets used to being in that position and it gets stiff to that shape. So if you're then trying to get yourself into a better posture, you're actually trying to get through years of semi-permanent concrete-like stiffness to try and get back into a better shape. So this is where the balls come in. So what I'll get you to do to begin with is we're not going to start right on the bump. We're going to start below the bump somewhere. So in between those shoulder blades, maybe the top of those shoulder blades, we're going to get you to lie down on top of the ball or balls. And all we want to get you to do here is, again, we're not going to roll up and down here. We're just going to find a spot that feels a little bit stiff. Depending on the surface that you're on, and depending on how bad that Dowager's hump is, you may need a pillow or a cushion or a rolled up towel here just to feel like you can be supported in this shape. And again, because if you're really stiff here and you can't actually extend through that neck and upper back, you might find that you'll end up just looking up the top, which can really jam up some of the joints at the top of your neck. So make sure that you can find a position that feels really comfortable for you. If the ground doesn't work for you, you can do this up against a wall. It's the same exercise. But what I want to get you to do, depending on what position you feel comfortable with, is if you feel this is enough pressure, that's fantastic. If you don't feel there's enough pressure here, I'll get you to lift your hips up off the ground to drive more force through these balls, through the joints of your upper back and neck. And then we've got two options. You can literally just hang out here and just wait for that tissue to release and that tissue to give. Now, because I've got two balls here, one is either side of the spine. So if you had one tennis ball or one lacrosse ball, you don't want to be on the bumps down the middle of the spine. You just want it to roll off so that you're on the joints and the soft tissue either side of that. But the peanut is a great way to get a little bit of pressure on both sides. You can just gently tilt your body from side to side to make sure that you're hitting the side that feels the stiffest. Then all I want you to do here is just stay here and let the tissue relax, let the soft tissue give, let those joints just subtly start to shift and start to open up and start to give as well. Do this for as long as you feel comfortable. If you feel like it's quite stiff and it's not moving, when you're on the upper back, we can bring your arm into it to really encourage some of those joints and those soft tissues to free up as well. But once you get to the neck, obviously we can't use the arm as much because it doesn't have the same effect on those joints. So again, once you've done this, then just move up a section. Just keep hunting around for where you feel the most stiffness and the most restriction is. Again, as a spoiler, for most people, it's going to be on one side. It's going to travel up and down on the same side. It's not going to skip from segment to segment and side to side. And then as we get to exactly where your Dowager's hump is, you might find again that there are some very stiff, very tight areas. So the idea with this exercise is we want to segmentally work our way up your neck as far as you feel you need to go, systematically freeing up as many of those restricted segments as possible to allow you to then get back into a better position more comfortably, so that when you're trying to maintain better postures day to day, you can do so from a better shape without trying to sort of force yourself against a lot of that stiffness that you may have. Now, obviously, there are a number of different stretches that can really, really help. If you have a Dowager's hump, it's very likely that you might find that you've got a little bit of a kyphosis and some rounded shoulders as well. You may even have an anterior pelvic tilt depending on what you do day to day. So just focusing on the neck itself is never really the answer to everything, but it's a fantastic start. But the other thing that's important to talk about is if you're doing all the hard work to free up some of the restrictions, maybe you're stretching your chest, mobilizing your upper back, maybe you're working on a lot of the tight tissue through your neck. We also need to have a conversation about strength. Now, I won't go through that in this video. Things like deep cervical flexor, deep neck flexor strength exercises, shrugs, shoulder exercises, chest exercises, back exercises, They're all good to reclaim some missing strength, muscle conditioning, and endurance. But the act of using those areas and doing exercises that revolve around your neck and upper back, it will start to decrease some of the stiffness in those areas as well. So the beautiful thing about muscular strength exercises is they can also double up as a mobility exercise by freeing up some of the tissue that regular mobility exercises may not get to. So I genuinely hope that was really helpful. Please remember the bigger picture, that a Dowager's hump is not just a genetic thing, it's not just a bad luck thing. It can be in some cases, but it's really hard to understand what proportion of your dysfunction you don't have control over versus what proportion you do have control over until you go through the process of trying to have control over everything. So please let me know how you go with that. Let me know how your Dowager's hump is going and what exercises you find are really helpful that you've been given day to day or that you found across the internet. But with that being said, I hope to see you in the next video. I'll see you soon. Bye.